On the podcast today, we're going to talk about one of the biggest struggles that I had when I started my company. Welcome back to the Merchandise Show. My name is Randy Troyer, and whenever I'm editing the previous episodes, I should say, I've always noticed that my excitement level is not very high whenever I record podcasts. I usually try to keep it, or I don't try to, but usually I'm keeping it pretty serious. I'm pretty toned down, and I'm like, that doesn't look like somebody that's enjoying their life, but I do enjoy life. I really do. There's a lot of times that things come up, hard things happen to me, but I am learning how to appreciate those things more and use those things more to better myself. But the big struggle that I want to talk about that I had when I first started my company was loving myself. And probably you struggle with loving yourself as well. And you might say, like, what do you actually mean by that? Do I mean like be a narcissist? No. You don't have to be obsessed with yourself. You don't need to lack empathy or be entitled or, whatever a narcissist does or whatever you think a narcissist does. You don't have to do that. So then what do I mean? Is this just going to be a podcast where I spew some suburban mom inspirational quotes at you all day long? And no offense to any suburban moms listening to this podcast. I really don't think that there is any that listen to this podcast, but just in case, I'll throw that out there. I asked ChatGPT to give me 3 inspirational quotes that sound like they came from white suburban women. The first one was, "Bloom where you're planted. Your journey is unfolding exactly as it should." And that's actually really funny because one of the people that I interviewed actually told me that quote. The second one was, "Collect moments, not things. The simple joys are what truly makes life beautiful." And the third one was, "Chase your dreams fearlessly, but don't forget to sprinkle in kindness everywhere you go." Now, the problem with these really cheesy and inspirational quotes is that there's usually an element of them that really hit home. But I'm not really talking about that either. I'm not talking about inspirational quotes. I'm not talking about being a narcissist. I'm talking more along the lines of loving yourself by working out, by taking your quiet time, by reflecting, by doing things that you enjoy. Now, the person that really got me to start doing these things was Nick Highfill, and I had him on the podcast once. But we met in April of 2023, and we started talking, and he basically just started asking me questions. He's great at conversation, and he asked me a bunch of questions and kind of got me to back myself into a corner when it came to like my exercise routine and my diet routine. In fact, I would go as far as to say as like he was the person, if there is one person that is responsible for getting me started on self-development, it would be Nick Highfill. And he was also the person to take me to my first self-development event. We can talk more about that later. But anyway, I still struggle with loving myself even today. Like I started my company a couple years ago, and even up till now, like I struggle to love myself. In fact, I was just dealing with this last week. There's many times that I get angry or disgusted at myself. And sometimes you don't even realize it. Like I can go a week or two and, you know, finally I come to the realization that something's wrong, that I'm on the wrong path, that's I need to fix something, I need to do some reflection, I need to do some thinking, I need to process something. And it usually comes back to somewhere along the line I just made a mistake and never forgave myself for it. And when you do that, or when I do that, I lose excitement for what I'm doing. I lose confidence. I lose ambition. And here's the most important part is I start to expect other people to hate me as much as I hate myself. And you might say like hate is a strong word to use there, but I guess I'm just using it to illustrate the point. You kind of expect people to dislike you as much as you dislike yourself. Because I think we forget that like all we see is the external part of people, and that's all people see of us. People don't actually see our thought processes. People don't actually see, what's going on in our heads, what's going on in our heart. They don't see all of the mistakes that we make every day, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. But like for the most part, I am pretty sure that there's a lot of the people around you that like you better than you like you because you realize all of the thoughts that all of the thoughts that you think. You know all of the mistakes that you've made at work, in relationships, whatever it is. You know all those mistakes. Not everybody around you does. And so I think it would be safe to say that there's a lot of people that probably like you better than you like you. But we need to stop that. If you think that that's not going to affect the way that you act or conduct business, like you're in for a huge surprise. And I really think that we need to remember that when we go out on a limb or when we start something that we've never done before or when we do all of these things that we aim for our goals and we start striving for those things and maybe we make a mistake, maybe we make a wrong turn and it really, really bothers us. Like whenever we're going to stretch ourselves and do something that we've never done before, we are going to make mistakes. We are. Like mistakes are just part of the process of finding success. In fact, they're a very, very big part of finding success. Now, I heard Matt Droget say that religion wants to focus on perfection when instead we should focus on progress. Now, I kind of paraphrased that. I can't remember exactly how he said it, but that was the thought that he gave there. And also, Orson talked about it on one of the last podcasts as well, focusing more on the gain instead of the gap. And why is this important? Like we talked about it before, when you don't love yourself, or maybe you don't love what you're doing, you're going to lose all your momentum. Another reason why it's important is because the Bible commands us to love our neighbor as ourself. And there's a couple verses that are kind of like this, like love your neighbor as yourself, and there's another one is like asking God to forgive us as we forgive others, which is in the Lord's Prayer. And we act like this is kind of like an option. Like maybe I will love somebody else, but I'm not necessarily going to love myself. Maybe I'm going to forgive somebody else, but I'm not going to forgive myself. These things, we often think that it's actually an option. We act like we can love our neighbor and hate ourselves, but I think it's more of like an automatic thing. Like if you're doing one, you're going to do the other. If you hate yourself, you're going to hate others as well. And in the same way, if you don't forgive others, God's not going to forgive you. And I also think that it's very, very important for us to forgive ourselves as well. And I don't actually think, when I talk about like hating others or hating your neighbor, like I don't actually think that we hate anyone. I think that we hate when we see our own flaws and inconsistencies in the way other people are acting or in what other people are doing. Now you could debate me on that, but a lot of times when I come to the realization that I really, really dislike something about someone, if I take 3 steps back, look at the entire scenario, more times than not, I am doing the exact same thing, maybe not in the same area of life, but maybe in a different area of life. And the reason I dislike that person so much or dislike that certain thing about that person is only because it's in me and it bothers me that I have that problem or have that inconsistency or have that thing that I need to work on. Never in everyday life is someone that loves themselves, someone that loves life. They're not going to chew you out for cutting them off in traffic or scream at you for making a mistake in your work, doing something like that. Like what I want to get to is like loving yourself leads to loving others. loving yourself leads to loving your neighbor as yourself. And maybe we should just all take a moment to look at how we treat our neighbors, because that will obviously give us a pretty good gauge on how we love ourselves. Now, another point that I wanted to make here is like I hear people praying and they ask God, God, please help me to see people the way that you see people, right? Whether that's evangelizing or, a tough relationship or something like that. But I just have to wonder, does that only apply to the way that they see the people around them? Or does that also apply to the way that they see themselves? And I just want to ask you a question. Do you think God resents you as much as you resent yourself for whatever mistakes you made or for whatever you've done or whatever thoughts that you think? Do you think God resents you as much as you resent you for doing all of those things? It's just a question. I'm just going to throw that out there. You can think on that. You can reflect on it. You can get back to me. Or don't. But definitely reflect on it. So like going through a bunch of this stuff, it kind of like begs the question, why don't we love ourselves? And in this section, like I don't want to try to speak for everyone. Obviously, I'm not everyone. I can't speak for everyone. Everybody's experience is different. But I know for myself, I never thought that I was worth the time. And what I mean by that is, I also want to throw in there like actions speak louder than words, right? When you don't take the time to work out, when you don't take the time to meditate or to make peace with ourselves, what we're really saying is that we ourselves are not worth the time that it takes to do all of those things. Like that was one of the biggest realizations that I came to when I started on my self-development journey, you could say, was I was waking up earlier, I was exercising, I was making myself a good breakfast, I was spending time meditating, praying, reflecting, doing all of these things, and the realization just came to me that I value myself so much more when I take time for myself to really see what's going on with me. And I also heard somebody say one time, and I really think it's a good question for all of us to ask, is like the most of the thoughts that we have in our head or most of the words that we speak to ourselves are negative. And I would just challenge you, I would just ask you, if you talked to me the same way that you talk to yourself, would we still be friends? It's a very, very good question to ask yourself. But getting back to these things, spending all that time to improve yourself is basically telling yourself that you are worth the time that it takes to make yourself better. Now, somebody showed me a video the other day of a wise man named Mr. Alex Hormozy. I'm sure a lot of you guys know him. And if you don't, you can look him up on YouTube. He's everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. Everywhere on the internet, you can find Alex Hormozy. But he talks about investing money. And I'll just play this video for you, and then I will commentate it.
So if you're under 30 and you're not making the amount of money that you want to make, instead of taking the excess cash you have and putting it into the S&P 500, I want you to put it into the S&Me 500. Take that $500 every single month and you plow it into you. You plow it into buying the skills that you need to learn how to market, how to sell, how to build products, how to get your name out there, how to brand, how to make content, all of those things that you need to learn. In a weekend, you can triple your earning income. Whereas if you take that $500 and try and plow it to earn 10% every year, it won't matter.
Now, I don't know if you're planning on or you want to make a bunch of cash, but the principle still applies to just developing your skills or bettering yourself. Like I would just encourage you, like go to a workshop, go to a seminar, go to a conference in some area that interests you, whether that's business, whether that's self-development, whether that's like a religious type of thing. Or, maybe if you don't want to like actually physically go out and do that, you could join an online group of people that are working on themselves. and keep yourself accountable to them. And usually those groups you got to spend a little bit of money to get into. Those conferences, those workshops, those seminars, you got to spend money to get into them. And that's a whole nother subject, but I think it is important to pay for those things because whatever we pay for something, we attach that much or that amount of value to it. And I think that it just has a huge, huge impact on how much that we actually extract and how much we actually value the content that is given within those workshops, seminars, or conferences, or online groups. Just go out, spend the money, spend the time to make yourself a better human. And ultimately, that's going to lead you to be a better entrepreneur. And a lot of people talk about that. That is a very, very uh, elementary point that a lot of people make. Now, without an online group that I was a part of, this podcast wouldn't be here. This group was a group of guys that were working on overcoming porn addiction and a group of guys that was working on their emotional health. And it was a group that was put on by Matt Drogat, which you can go back and listen to the episode where I had him on and interviewed him. It was more toward the beginning of the podcast. But he was the one that really helped me to start reflecting on a lot of different areas in my life. And one area in particular being like what I really wanted to do with my life. And over that time that he had challenged me to like actually take action, do something with all of those thoughts, do something with all of those desires, do something with those goals that you have in your heart, do something with them. And to be completely honest, like I had thought about starting a podcast before, but I never really wanted to follow through on it because I was afraid of people thinking that I was just going to try to, like I was just doing this to show off. And that came from back in school. I actually started a newspaper, like a school newspaper. This was back probably 2009, 10, 11, somewhere in there. And we covered the news. I actually wrote a column in there that was just a fictional story that I would just make up every week or every time that we released the newspaper. That section of the newspaper was just a column that a fictional story that I was making up as I went along. I didn't even write the entire thing before we started publishing the newspaper. It was just read the newspaper from last week and just build on that story a little bit, and that was the story for this week. Anyway, we had jokes in there, we had the weather, we had the news, we had the story, we had miscellaneous pictures, we had art from the other students. I think you get the point. But I did hear kind of like news. You know how grapevines work. You know how the news gets around. You know how people's thoughts and opinions come out through their children at school. If you don't know that, well then that is the way it works. Whatever your opinions, whatever your thoughts, whatever you say at home, it comes out at school. Your kids tell everybody else basically what you think and what you say at home. But one of the students there was just telling me that I was doing this strictly because I wanted to show off, that I was just writing the newspaper basically because I lacked attention or I wasn't getting enough attention. And that was not my intention at all. I love writing. I love uh, like editing and publishing. I love to do all that stuff, and that's why I started it. But when it came to starting this podcast, I think I was just having a little bit of flashbacks to that. Like, I don't want people to think that I'm trying to show off or that I know so much or that I'm so smart or anything. I'm not trying to show off. I'm not trying to gain a whole bunch of attention. But, I mean, at this point, I don't really even care. But that was one of the things that kept me from starting this podcast. And Matt Droget kind of coached me along. He encouraged me. He really got me to dig into, like, the desires and the goals that I had deep down in my heart. And I overcame that and decided to just go ahead and do it. And it's been great. Like, I've really, really enjoyed it. Like, to be completely honest, not like I haven't been completely honest up to this point, but to be completely honest, I actually started this as kind of a marketing ploy for my video production company. I wanted to interview local businesses, business owners in particular, to try to get in front of them, to try to make contact with them, to get their phone number, things like that. And that way, maybe 3 or 4, 6 months down the road, I could follow up and actually start doing business in the form of like video marketing for them. I just wanted to get in front of people and I wanted to talk to people face to face because I found that cold calls or cold emails, things like that, weren't really working. In fact, I would get, people would hang up in the middle of my first sentence. People would never reply to my emails, things like that. And I just thought, well, if I could get in front of them and if I could just talk to them face to face, they could see that I'm just a normal guy and that I'm not going to try to sell them things that they don't want or they don't need. I'm I'm just trying to help. So that was kind of like how this podcast started, but what I found out is I actually enjoyed the podcasting more than I enjoyed trying to market my own company. And so I decided to keep the podcast and actually let the video production company kind of go, kind of wither away. It's still working. We still have a few projects that we're working on, a few previous clients that we work with, things like that. And so we're still doing stuff, but it's not as much of a priority to me as it used to be. Anyway, so I've been really enjoying the podcast, and I hope you guys have been enjoying it as well. There's been a few people that have told me they've enjoyed listening to it, and I appreciate that. I really, really appreciate you guys tuning in and listening. Those of you who do it on a regular basis, or those of you who do it every other episode or every third or whenever you have time, I appreciate the time that you guys give me. And yeah, we're gonna keep on rolling with this thing. Now, another thing that I wanted to say is like self-development events. I know some people may think that these things are kind of a bunch of fluff, maybe a bunch of rah-rah, but I love them. And I'm just going to say it right here and right now, and we're going to manifest this with as much strength as lies within me. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to start organizing these events in the future. But in these events, obviously, there's a lot of information and speeches on subjects like mindset, entrepreneurship, which is right up my alley. I wouldn't consider myself a really, really accomplished entrepreneur, but I like to talk about it. I like to think about it. And I am putting a lot of those things into practice, kind of behind the scenes. I am working on my own company. I am doing all of that. It doesn't look like I originally thought it would. And that's okay. And like we said before, like some people might think that these events are just a bunch of rah-rah. But like I'll just ask a question, like why is that such a bad thing? Why is that such a bad thing? Like if I think about it, most of the people in my life, and the majority of people that would claim that these events are just a bunch of rah-rah, those are the people that need more rah-rah in their life. And really, like, I am not trying to promote like rah-rah stuff. Like, obviously, you go to these events, you get fired up about something, you get inspired. And all I'm asking you to do is like actually move forward on those desires, on those goals, on those feelings that you feel at those types of events. Do something with them. Obviously, they're there for a reason. Whatever speaker was speaking, whatever happened at that event, obviously it stirred something that was deep within you that you haven't thought about in a long time. And like I believe all of that stuff happens for a reason. So act on it. Act on it. You can leave the rah-rah behind, but just invest some time, invest some effort into those goals, into those dreams, into those desires. Because that's how you're actually going to prove to yourself that your thoughts or the things that you feel or the things that you want in life, that's how you're actually going to prove that they actually matter that they actually mean something. And really, until you start to value those things and hold those things in high regard, nobody else is going to hold them in high regard. And if we get all down and out on our goals and dreams and we think that they're stupid ideas and we don't hold them in high regard, I don't know why we would expect anybody else to hold them in high regard. Most of the times, you're going to be the only one that thinks that your goals and your dreams are a good idea. And you have to hold to that. You have to cling to that. You have to love yourself and love your ideas and love your desires and love your goals enough to hold them up, because nobody else is going to do it for you. Trust me in that. Nobody else is going to do it for you. You've got to do it for yourself. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I appreciate you guys listening. If you like what you heard, what you saw, please subscribe here on YouTube or on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram or TikTok. And remember, go out there and mind your own business.